for Kubica, and a horrible accident going on there.
Formula One has killed more people than almost any sport in modern history. And yet, again and again, drivers have walked out of fires, flipped cars, and 95G impacts that had no business leaving anyone alive. This isn't a story about luck. It's a story about the men who refused to die, and what the sport was forced to learn from every single one of them. Stick around, because the last crash on this list is the one that changed Formula One forever.
And a big fire there as they exited out of turn 3, and that looks very nasty indeed, and unsurprisingly, that is a red flag.
Practice day has arrived, and so have the cars.
It all begins in Monaco, 1955. Alberto Ascari, Monaco, 1955. Alberto Ascari was already a two-time world champion, having won titles in 1952 and 1953 with Ferrari. By 1955, he'd moved to Lancia, and the season had been a rough one. On lap 80 of the Monaco Grand Prix, race leader Stirling Moss suddenly retired with engine failure.
Stirling Moss comes in with a trail of smoke. With 19 laps to go, his race is run.
And for a brief moment, the lead fell into Ascari's hands. Moss's failure may have left oil across the harborside chicane. Ascari's brakes had already been giving him trouble all race. Then, the Lancia lost grip. It slid through the straw bales and plunged straight into the harbor. The crowd went silent. Within seconds, the car had vanished completely beneath the water. Witnesses on the harbor wall said it disappeared before they even understood what they were watching. Then Ascari surfaced, dazed but swimming. He was pulled out with a broken nose and relatively minor injuries. But here's the strange part about Alberto Ascari. What happened 4 days later had nothing to do with the harbor at all. 4 days after Monaco, Ascari went to Monza for an unscheduled test, wearing a borrowed helmet. He crashed. He was killed. The man who survived being swallowed by the sea died on an ordinary Thursday, testing a car nobody expected him to drive. No spectacular crash reel, no fireball, no dramatic rescue. Just a routine lap that went wrong in an instant. 4 days after he'd cheated death in front of a stunned harbor crowd. It's one of the strangest coincidences in motorsport history, and it set the tone for the next 2 decades. Between 1955 and 1976, Formula One lost more than 20 drivers. The cars were fragile, the circuits brutally fast, runoff areas were practically non-existent, and the sport just kept racing anyway, until one driver, already a world champion twice over, decided it couldn't go on like this anymore. Niki Lauda, Nürburgring, 1976. Niki Lauda arrived at the 1976 German Grand Prix with a commanding championship lead over James Hunt. The week before the race, he tried to organize a driver boycott. The Nürburgring, he argued, was too long, too isolated, with medical cover nowhere near good enough for a car that could kill you. The other drivers voted him down. The race went ahead. On lap 2, Lauda's Ferrari snapped right approaching Bergwerk, slammed the embankment, bounced back onto the racing line, and burst into flames. Brett Lunger arrived seconds later and collided with the wreck. The car was fully engulfed. Lauda was trapped inside, breathing burning, toxic gas. His helmet already knocked loose. The Nordschleife stretched over 22 kilometers, and the only medical helicopter sat at the opposite end of it. It took 5 to 6 minutes to reach him. No marshal got there in time. Incredibly, the race continued around the wreckage. It was the other drivers who saved his life. Arturo Merzario ran into the flames and released his harness. Brett Lunger, Guy Edwards, and Harold Ertl dragged him clear. Lauda had severe burns across his face, hands, and scalp. Most of his right ear was gone. His lungs were damaged from the toxic smoke. At the hospital, a priest was called in to administer last rites. Lauda later said hearing that priest was the exact moment he decided to fight. He missed 2 races, just 2. 42 days later, burns still raw, fresh bandages under his helmet, Lauda showed up at Monza and raced the entire weekend. Blood seeped through the lining of his helmet from his open scalp wounds. He finished 4th, arriving at the season's final race in Japan with a 3-point lead over Hunt. That same year, the Nordschleife hosted its last ever Formula One race. The circuit that nearly killed him was erased from the calendar. He lost the championship by a single point and won it outright the year after. Gerhard Berger, Imola, 1989. Gerhard Berger was running near the front at the 1989 San Marino Grand Prix, his Ferrari carrying almost a full fuel load, roughly 150 kilograms. As he approached Tamburello, the flat-out 280 kilometers per hour left-hander he'd taken cleanly dozens of times before. Then the front wing failed. The Ferrari hit the concrete wall at full speed, and with that much fuel on board, the impact turned instantly into a fireball. It took 23 seconds to put the fire out. The commentators went silent. Nobody moved. Berger was pulled from the wreck with fractured ribs and severe burns to his hands, and nothing worse. Engineers and doctors asked the obvious question: how does anyone survive a full fuel fire at that speed? There was no clean answer. Berger called it a miracle. His own engineers weren't sure he was wrong. Ferrari spent years afterward asking one uncomfortable question: what happens if another car hits that same wall at that same speed, on a different lap, in a different race, without the same margin of luck Berger had somehow been given? 5 years later, at that exact corner, they found out, and the answer changed Formula One more than any single crash before or since. Rubens Barrichello, Imola, 1994. Rubens Barrichello was 21, the young Brazilian everyone back home hoped could follow Ayrton Senna. In his second season with Jordan, he was fast, and on the very first flying lap of Friday qualifying at Imola, everything went wrong. His Jordan hit the curb at the Variante Bassa chicane at roughly 225 kilometers per hour, launched into the air, and slammed into the tire barrier. The impact was estimated at 95 G. Barrichello was knocked out instantly, his tongue blocking his airway. FIA doctor Sid Watkins reached him first and cleared it before anyone else arrived. Marshals then did something unthinkable by today's standards. They turned the wrecked car upright by hand, with no protocol at all, just people trying to reach the driver trapped inside. When Ayrton Senna heard his countryman was in the medical center, he left the paddock and sat beside him, refusing to leave until he knew Barrichello would be okay. Barrichello woke up to find him there. A broken nose, a sprained wrist. That was it. He watched the rest of the weekend from a hospital bed. The next day, Roland Ratzenberger was killed in qualifying. The day after that, Ayrton Senna died in the race. Barrichello would go on to start 323 Grand Prix and win 11 of them. But his crash happened on the Friday of the single darkest weekend in Formula One history, and it shattered any illusion the sport still had that the cars had become safe enough. Everything built after that weekend was built differently, because it had to be. Mika Hakkinen, Adelaide, 1995. The final Formula One race ever held at Adelaide. Mika Hakkinen was 27, in his third McLaren season, still without a win, but already regarded as one of the fastest drivers on the grid. Late in qualifying, a rear tire deflated at high speed. The car became instantly uncontrollable and slammed into the wall.
There's Mika. Oh, look at that. Well, we don't know why. The car came so quickly into sight. Even the camera unable to keep up with it. It flew. And really, the loss of speed.
Hakkinen suffered a fractured skull. He stopped breathing. 2 intensive care specialists, volunteering as trackside medics, reached him within seconds. One of them, Dr. Jerome Cockings, made a split-second call. He cut into Hakkinen's throat right there at the track and performed an emergency tracheotomy. Professor Sid Watkins arrived moments later and helped restart his heart. The hospital was only 500 meters from the crash site. Damon Hill later called watching that rescue one of the most frightening things he'd ever seen in racing. Häkkinen spent weeks in hospital. Nerve damage left half his face paralyzed for months. Then McLaren arranged a private test at Paul Ricard, and, unable to fully control one side of his face, he went out and reportedly beat every prior benchmark from the team's previous session. He returned the following season. In 1998, he won his first world championship. In 1999, he won it again. The crash hadn't slowed him down. If anything, it made him quieter, sharper, and even harder to beat. Felipe Massa, Budapest, 2009. 1 year earlier, Felipe Massa had come within a single point of the World Championship. For a few seconds, the timing screens even showed him as champion, before Lewis Hamilton took it away at the final corner of the final lap. By 2009, his season had already fallen apart. Ferrari's F60 was one of the weakest cars the team had built in years. Hungary was supposed to be different, a circuit where Ferrari usually performed. In Q2, Massa was midway through a clean, fast lap. Ahead of him, Rubens Barrichello was cruising on a cool-down lap. Nothing unusual. When a suspension spring weighing roughly 900 grams came loose from Barrichello's car and bounced across the circuit. Massa arrived at over 190 kilometers per hour, and the spring struck his helmet 1 centimeter above his left eye. He lost consciousness instantly. His foot stayed on the throttle. The car ran straight on into the tire barrier. No braking, because there was no one left conscious to brake. Barrichello, still ahead, had no idea anything had happened. There was nothing on the radio, just a car that had quietly stopped on the timing screens. Massa was airlifted to hospital in Budapest with 2 skull fractures. He underwent emergency brain surgery and spent 2 days in an induced coma. A titanium plate later replaced the bone lost above his eye. He spent 9 days in hospital while his wife, 6 months pregnant, waited for news. Michael Schumacher was lined up to replace him but pulled out with a neck injury of his own. A spring weighing less than a kilogram had nearly ended a career, and very nearly a life. Massa returned in 2010 and raced for 8 more seasons. Years later, he called the crash not bad luck, but a gift. He was still here, with his family. His accident came just 6 days after Formula 2 driver Henry Surtees was killed in almost identical circumstances, a loose wheel to the helmet, and together, the 2 crashes pushed cockpit protection research into overdrive. The sport already knew the question. The answer was still years away. Romain Grosjean, Bahrain, 2020. Lap 1. Grosjean was in the final weeks of a 10-year Formula 1 career. Haas had already confirmed he was leaving the team, with 2 races left after this one. All he needed to do was finish. It was a night race, his car carrying a full fuel load, when he made contact with Daniil Kvyat's Alpha Tauri on the opening lap. His Haas was launched right at 192 kilometers per hour and hit the Armco barrier nose first.
Certainly damage and a big fire there as they exited out of turn 3.
Peak impact, 67 G. The car was torn clean in half, the fuel system ruptured, and the front section, with Grosjean still inside, vanished into a fireball burning somewhere between 800 and 1000 degrees Celsius. And Grosjean was conscious the entire time. He tried to sit himself up. He thought of his children. Then he thought of Niki Lauda. The halo above his head pushed the barrier rail away from the cockpit, protecting the survival cell around him. And somehow, Grosjean climbed out on his own, over the barrier and into the arms of Dr. Ian Roberts. Roberts and medical car driver Alan van der Merwe reached the scene just 11 seconds after impact. A Marshall's fire extinguisher cracked open the one gap in the flames Grosjean needed to escape through. 28 seconds. That's how long it took from impact to Grosjean walking out of the fire. For everyone watching, it felt endless. He suffered 2nd and 3rd degree burns to both hands. Not a single broken bone. Formula 1 hadn't seen a driver trapped in flames like that since Lauda, but it also hadn't seen anyone walk out of a fire like that either. The investigation that followed rewrote fuel bladder design, barrier standards, and glove heat ratings across the entire sport. Every discovery became a rule. Every rule became protection for the next driver in line. Zhou Guanyu, Silverstone, 2022. Lap 1, July 3rd. Zhou Guanyu was 23, a rookie who just qualified 9th in his debut season, but nothing in Formula 1's history had prepared anyone for what was about to happen to him. At the start, Pierre Gasly clipped George Russell's rear left tire, sending Russell's Mercedes sideways into Zhou's Alfa Romeo. Zhou's car launched into the air, flipped upside down, and slid down the track at racing speed, resting on nothing but its roll hoop. Russell parked his own wrecked car and sprinted straight to the barrier to find out if Zhou was alive. Zhou was pulled out conscious, with no major injuries. That afternoon, he posted 3 words: "Halo saved me today." The following weekend, he raced in Austria and finished it. The Halo had been introduced in 2018 against fierce resistance. Plenty of drivers hated the way it looked. Within 4 years, it had already been the difference between a tragedy and a driver climbing out to walk again. A spring that misses by a centimeter. A corner that holds instead of breaks. A single second where the technology does exactly what it was built to do. That's the entire gap between every name on this list and the ones Formula One lost before them. The halo that saved Zhou in 2022 exists because of what Imola demanded in 1994, because of what Massa's spring exposed in 2009, because of everything Niki Lauda survived, and everything he refused to stay quiet about afterward. One survival becomes the next rule. One rule becomes the next survival. That's the only reason this list keeps getting longer instead of shorter, and it's also the reason none of these names ended up on a different, much darker list instead. If a two-time world champion could climb out of Monaco harbor, and a rookie could walk away from a car flipping at full speed, there's a good chance you're about to see something on this channel you didn't expect either. So make sure you're still here when it happens. Hit subscribe now, and drop the driver from this list who shook you the most in the comments. I read every single one.